Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for adjusting your schedules this morning. I know that this second session, which is really built around the forms in the instruction manual, uh, are really going to be the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking about. And so just as in the earlier session, all of those if you have any questions as we're going through, I have built in some pause points where I will ask, if anybody has any questions. Feel free to raise your hand icon as we talked about before, as well as um, using the chat function, if you do have the chat function available. Shelly, I think that you were able to log out and log back in, and the chat function became available. So that's good to know. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, this particular session, what we're going to be talking about is the recommendations. Just a really quick overview of the recommendations that were discussed in the earlier session. We're going to talk a little bit about the metrics and prioritization process that the higher education department developed. And then we're also going to talk about the instruction manual and the new forms that were developed for the annual capital outlay funding request for all of the higher ed institutions. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about and go over real quickly is the recommendations. Um, so we did cover this in the previous presentation, so I don't want to go over it in too much detail, but I did want to just start out by discussing some of the things that were recommended in the report. The development, and the implementation of project prioritization, right? Which is the formal scoring and ranking with an objective scoring methodology, where all the HEIs, are encouraged to develop projects that support and advance the state and NMHED initiatives, right? These are processes that, per the information in the report, are best practices used in other states. And there are other states that are trying to do their part in developing these types of processes as well. Of course, as far as the software goes, you heard Glen talk about, the software recommending a software implementation that's independent of campus assessments. As we looked at the 2006 assessment that was done, that was a package deal where funding was provided for the assessment, and initial funding was provided for the creation of the software, which was the comment, right? But in the report and in the recommendation, it really talked about separating those two items as being a good as being a good process, keeping the assessment separate from the actual software, and using the software for just scoring and ranking. The other item that that I think is important that was discussed is also the standard elements, right? Developing formal recommendations for standard elements to be prioritized or included in the master plan. Some schools, as the report noted, have little more than 5-year plans, while others have facility assessments and utilization targets as part of their campus goals. This is what the report noted. So in the recommendation, it stated that setting the standard elements, such as overall space utilization, classroom efficiencies, those items that Glenn talked about, you know, are recommended for standardizing first before moving anything. And then, of course, I think we hit a little bit on the reinstatement and updating of the building renew and repair process. I think one of the biggest things that was called out in the report was a return to the mandate that BR&R be expended only for the reduction of deferred maintenance. And so, we talked a little bit about that. I think Marvin, you had a question about that, and so that's something that we recognized as something that that the institutions brought up and that the report recommended. And then, of course, the increase in the NMHED role, right, which is, conducting periodic audits, reviews, doing space verifications, and so forth. So that's a little bit about what, a little overview of what those recommendations were. So what I want to talk about next, is when we looked at the report and what other states were doing or working towards doing, it became clear that we needed to adjust our process. So what we did is we took that information that was provided in the report, and fortunately, we were able to continue to have GHaubold Consulting on with us for these next steps that we endeavored on. And so the first step that we endeavored on is the metric and prioritization process. So this process and what you see on the screen here, and I guess before I continue, you're more than welcome to open up the instruction manual. I did send you all a link to the training materials. In that link, you're going to find a link to the in the invite link, you're going to find the link to the training materials on the higher ed website. You're more than welcome to follow along as we go through, because this information is in the instruction manual. So what I was talking about is in these project evaluation measures, we decided that it was important in order to develop some overarching components in our evaluation process. Those components are project need, stewardship, and energy and sustainability. These components are really the benchmark for our evaluation process. And in all reality, they're developed in a way so that they cannot change. So these three components are not going to change. The next item that we worked on was creating or developing the measures that are under each component. And what we did is we used our current New Mexico Administrative Code. As you all know, that is what we have always used as our criteria for reviewing projects. We also looked at any current legislation that has been introduced. And we also looked at the statewide initiatives that have been introduced. And we looked at some of the best practices that other states have implemented. And this is all information that was provided in the report. What we did with these measures, such as growth, retention, degree production under project need, workforce needs, goal alignment, and so forth, is these are the measures that are adaptable to any changes in the administration. Now, when I say adaptable, I don't mean that growth, retention, and degree production are not going to be important as we evaluate projects, for the foreseeable future. But what I'm saying is that anything that we adjust or adapt or add to this process will need to be or need to fall under one of the overarching components, right? One of the benchmark components of project need, stewardship, energy, and sustainability. We felt this was important because we wanted to make sure that institutions had a benchmark. The next thing that we did is we used the components and the measures, and we developed a formal scoring rubric, which of course is what we as an agency will use in order to score and prioritize all of the higher education capital outlay funding requests each year. One of the things that we noted in the recommendations was the need to establish standard elements. And so what's important for me, and I think what I want to try and convey as best as possible with this particular slide, and as we're discussing this topic, is that these components and measures really should be used by the higher education institutions, to develop their 5-year capital plans and further develop and implement in their master plans. Because again, this is the criteria that will be used for all institutions as we review capital outlay funding requests. Because we definitely want to touch on project rationale and need. The promotion of enrollment, growth, retention, and degree production. Does this particular project do that? What is the impact on education and workforce needs in the local economy and regional economy? And then for energy and sustainability, what is the operational cost reduction? Are you incorporating energy efficiencies or other sustainable measures in the project? And we'll talk about this in more detail as we get into the forms themselves. But I really wanted to highlight on this particular section here how this really does. This is what the higher education department developed in an effort to create a standardized elements that higher education institutions could use as they develop their projects. As far as the reinstatement of the building renewal and replacement component, that was a recommendation in the report as well. And so one of the things that I want to highlight that we've done under stewardship is the use of building repair and renewal funds and maintenance cost reduction elements. And the reason why I bring that up is because, to our point earlier and what we were discussing, this is the information that is going to be important for us at the higher education department in order to, number one, better understand the current use of building renewal and repair, and number two, as I mentioned before, better understand, how capital may be how BR&R may be supplemented by using capital in order to build a case for higher education and build a case for creating a sustainable revenue stream for BR&R. That's the important piece of stewardship that we will talk about as we get further along and as we start to look at the forms, the specific forms. Again, this piece is really a work in progress that'll give us the data to strategize on that, on possible solutions for you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause real quick to see if anybody has any questions on this section. I do see that there are some comments in the chat. And so Scott, I do have a question from that says, how does space utilization data fit into this metrics? And that is a really good question. And so the way space utilization fits into this metrics is in a couple of ways. Our expectation is that institutions will provide us with information on how this project is going to promote enrollment, growth, retention, and degree production. And so we want to understand if what your current facility needs are actually play into the need for a new facility or renovation of existing space. That's the one aspect of it. But the true tie-in is under stewardship under C2, which is the facility condition index or NAV reduction. And so as we get to that particular form, you're going to see that that we are actually requesting that the institution provide us data that supports the need for the renovation and any data that supports the space utilization for that. And so as we get to that, we'll talk a little bit more about the specific details of how that ties in. But is there any other questions that anybody has in here? Okay, so I'll go ahead and continue on to the next section. So this next question, this next section is really in order for us to talk about the instruction manual and the forms. So obviously, as we built up the items that we talked about before, the metrics, and all of the information that is within that metrics, we felt it was important for us to create an instruction manual that outlined what the expectations were from the agency, and then also the forms that the institutions could use in order to provide that data that we were requesting. And so that's where we're at here with this section is, and that we're going to talk about what that looks like. Again, I'm going to just go ahead and say that if you haven't already done so and you'd like to, you can pull up the instruction guide and follow along. So the instruction manual, as an FYI, has been updated for the 2021 fiscal year 23 capital outlay funding cycle. So there are some changes in the manual that were made. And so those changes are specific to dates and specific to some minor updates. So there's no huge changes from the original manual that was introduced last year. But I wanted to just caveat that because I didn't want for anybody to feel like there was any major changes to the manual. So section 1, it just provides an introduction, information on the agency's statutory authority to recommend funding. And then, of course, it discusses the funding sources and it goes into detail on the submission process. One of the things that I want to bring up, as I mentioned on the updates, is the deadline to submit projects is June 1st of 2021. Now, we did make an exception last year because of the health orders by the governor, the closure of campuses, and we did move that back to July 1st. But this year, the deadline is back to the June 1st deadline. Section 2 provides instructions on what to expect when submitting a funding request. Talks about the project evaluation measures and the formal scoring and ranking rubric, which we covered in the previous slides. And then what we'll be talking about today, and what I really wanted to get more in depth on, is the forms. Specifically, what has been called out for in the instruction manual and how that translates into what we need when you're filling out. As I mentioned before, we rolled this out last year without this type of a training. Now, so I know that everybody is familiar with the forms, those that were involved in the process for submitting projects last year. And what I hope you'll take from this training today is more detailed guidance on what it is that the forms are asking for and what it is that we need in order to review and assess and score each of these measures, going forward. So for this year's funding cycle, the forms that are required are very, are similar to what you all have been submitting in the past, right? And I'm not going to go into detail on these forms because I don't really think that it's necessary. But the checklist, which is just a quick reference of the required documents for the evaluation of projects for capital funding. The one thing that I want to highlight on this year's checklist is our ability to receive data at the agency, has changed over time. Originally, as you all know, we had an FTP site where all of the summer hearing projects were submitted. The FTP site was removed from operation, and we had to come up with other ways in order to receive the projects. This year, we have been provided by DoIT a new way in order to receive large files. The unfortunate part with this process is we have to actually instigate it. So if you look at the checklist this year, please note that when you guys have all of your project submittal documentation ready to be submitted, you will have to send an email to me, and then I will in turn send you the link for you to upload the projects. So that's one important change that I wanted to make note of this year, and that is listed on the checklist. Send me an email, I'll send you the link. The next item, of course, is the certification, which, as you all know, this establishes that the institutional leadership and governing board has approved the 5-year plan, which is to be considered. And of course, it also certifies that 5% of the appropriation can be incurred within 6 months of the bond issuance date. As you all know, this is a GO bond year. So it is important that that your projects be developed accordingly. The project evaluation forms, these are what we're going to go into a lot of detail on. The 5-year plan for capital project funding, you all know what that plan is. I won't go into detail on it. The ING spreadsheet, same thing. It's a form that we've used each year. The status of all active projects. This is a form that we did not require last year for the submittal. However, this year it is being reintroduced, as well as the status of all closed projects. That's also being reintroduced. And then the ING campus-wide space verification. So this is also being reintroduced this year. So again, I won't go into too much detail on these. We're really going to concentrate on the project evaluation forms. If anybody has any questions on the other sheets, please let me know. We can definitely talk about them if you'd like. So as we look at the project evaluation forms, you know, one of the things that you're going to find is that, you know, a lot of the information is very, very standard. And there's really not much need to get into it into too much detail. So we obviously are, you know, are looking for the name of the institution. If it's a branch community college, you know, list the name of the branch campus. The location of the project. Provide the street address of the project and attach an aerial map view of the project location. You know, that's important. You know, we need to understand, you know, the location of the project, the specific location of the project. I know a lot of times individuals, you know, will put main campus or something along those lines. We really want the street address, and then we need that aerial map view of the project location. The project title, you know, of course, you know, provide a unique descriptive title for the project. I think everybody does it, you know, knows this well, and you know your project, so so providing that title is important. The FY23 priority number. So this section here is where you'll list the rank in the 5-year plan. The next section for master plan priority number, that's where you'll list the rank in the campus master plan. So if you have, if you only have a 5-year plan and you don't have a campus master plan, then there's no reason, then don't put any information in the master plan section, you know. But if you do have both, make sure that you distinguish between the two. The total project cost, this is the total cost of the project. And the reason why I wanted to talk a little bit about this section is because I want to make sure that institutions are listing the total cost for the project as a whole. And when I say that, I know that there are projects that have been funded previously, and then that particular portion of the project and the current requested amount are separated. I want to make sure that the total project cost is covered here. And the reason for that is because there are sections in the forms, and we'll get to those, where you can elaborate on if phase 1 was already funded, then that accounts for a piece of the total project cost. And then, of course, the state funding request is the amount that you are asking the state to recommend. You know, the amount that you want higher education to recommend. And then the next section is the committed match funding. So it's important that that the state funding and the match funding match the total project cost. And what's important about that, and what I want to clarify is the committed match funding does not always have to be institution funding. And the reason why I say that is because if you have prior year state funds that are going towards that total project cost, that is committed match funding. So please keep that in mind as you're filling this out, and keep that in mind in the requirement that the total project cost has to match the request and match. Specify the source of committed match funding. This is meant to capture those funding sources that are committed match. This is where you'll list if it's local funds, if it's institutional funds, if it's other state funds that you've already received. So just to be clear, the total project cost needs to be the total cost of the project as a whole. The committed match funding needs to include not just institution funding, but also previous state funding that you may have already received. And then the section I will actually allow you the opportunity to clarify what that funding is. $60,000 from the R&R, $1 million from local GHaubold, and then, as an example, $500,000 from 2019 general. So again, I hope that was clear. We can talk about it again. The next item is, if funding was requested in the past for this project, provide a brief summary to include when it was presented, amount of funding received, and any changes from original requests. So this right here is really meant to capture, if the project was previously submitted for funding to the higher education department. If it was, then we want details. When was it submitted? How much did you request? What the scope of work was for? And if it was funded, provide details on that as well. So again, I just wanted to make sure that we covered these, because I think that there has been some confusion, and we didn't have a training, so it's understandable. So I wanted to make sure to cover these so that everybody had a clear understanding of what that, of what those are. So I'm going to go ahead and just look at the chat real quick here, because I do notice that there's a couple of questions. So the first question is, the match funding can be prior year. And so the answer to that is yes. Match funding can be prior year if it is state funds, because again, we want to capture any funding that is going to support the project as a whole. The next question, what's a rule of thumb percent that the committee likes to see for match funding? It's actually not a rule of thumb. It's written in the NMHED. And the NMHED requires that community colleges provide a 25% match. So like I say, that's the information on that particular question. There is, and I want to clarify, if you do review the New Mexico Administrative Code, the higher education department can entertain other options for the match. So the next question is, what if the project does not have committed match funding? Will that hurt a project request? The reality is that the New Mexico Administrative Code has the requirement for community colleges, but it also has options. And so I can't answer that question as a yes or as a no, because it is going to be dependent on whether or not an institution not providing a match is an option that we can consider. And so again, that's something that that we have to review and analyze. I'm going to use a couple of institutions as examples. We have institutions that have utilized previous match funding on other projects, as a gauge for us to evaluate this particular, these particular or the most current requests. And we have done that. That there's also other cases where, where match funding may have been provided for, to supplement another project that potentially came, it was over budget. Those are some of the things that it's important for us to better understand. And, whenever you're requesting projects. And I think that was the last question that I see here. If an institution is, actually there is a few more. If an institution is working on grant but does not have the award, how do you note that? It has to be committed. So we look at it as committed match funding. And the reason why we do that is because, keep in mind, our recommendation is a recommendation for to fully fund a project. If we're going to make a recommendation, it's based on a fully funded project. And so, so if there is no match that is committed, then it is difficult for us to count that as a match, and it potentially may be difficult for the committee, as we're reviewing, to to ascertain, whether or not the project can be completed without that match. And so there's another comment in here, and then this is the last one that I'll review or look at on this topic is 25% match or 25% of the project cost. So the 25% match is 25% of the total project cost. So so that's how we're looking at it. So now let's go on to the next item. So now let's talk about the criteria under the project need component. So as you can see, the project need component has measures underneath it: growth, retention, degree production, workforce needs, goal alignment, and so forth. So as we look at measure B1, which is the project's promotion of enrollment growth, it's important to note that the intent of this measure is to focus on projects that can demonstrate support of this primary goal with data. So one of the things that that I want to emphasize in this particular section is we are looking for the project-specific ability to promote enrollment growth. If you are remodeling, for instance, a science facility, that has had lagging enrollment, and we know, or should I say, that that lagging enrollment is due to students, wanting to apply and go to another institution that potentially has that same program, but has more up-to-date, state-of-the-art facilities. You need to be able to demonstrate that to us, right? We need to be able to understand, how you were able to ascertain that data and how this particular project is going to increase that enrollment. The same goes for retention, and the same goes for, for degree production. We all know that there are data points and there are studies that have shown that newer state-of-the-art facilities definitely assist with increasing enrollment. But we don't want generalized data. We want data that talks specifically to your project, your specific program, and how the project is going to address the promotion of enrollment, growth, and retention, and degree production. Our scoring is spread out, as you can see on the screen, to discuss, whether it's to allow the committee to score based on whether the project substantially targets programs that are constrained by quantity or the quality of the space. And then, of course, somewhat, and then very little and not at all. So again, like I say, that's the information that we're looking for on this particular measure. The next measure is project's impact on education and workforce needs. The same goes for this as it did for the previous, which is we are not looking for generalized information on workforce or generalized information on local or regional economy needs. We're looking for specific detail on how this particular project is going to impact workforce needs, in your current region of the state, and of course, locally at your, in your specific area. And the example that I'll use for that is, healthcare. So we know that COVID-19 has really put a strain on healthcare in New Mexico. We know that certain parts of the state have had, excuse me, have had larger impacts than others. And so if your facility and the work that you're going to do on your facility, if that renovation of that facility, is going to target a nursing program, for instance, and a facility that houses a nursing program, then we need to really understand what that significant community impact, is going to be. We need to understand, how that is going to align with, with a long-term local and regional plans for economic development. If it's that nursing facility and you renovate that nursing facility, it is going to, you're going to provide us data that shows that your current facility, this is the number of people you have in it, number of cohorts, and then how that is going to increase, how the renovation of that facility is going to bring it up to par, to where you're going to potentially increase enrollment and increase retention and degree production. And then those individuals are then going to be able to go out into the workforce in your local areas, your local hospitals, your local clinics, so on and so forth. That's the tie-in that we're looking at. And so, again, we want to make sure that it is project specific. And if you look at the scoring, you'll see, how the committee members are looking at it. And if you look at the instruction manual, you're going to see, items that that need to be demonstrated, right? Increased wages, job creation, evidence of current and future labor market demand, you know, a credible plan, substantially addressing the current and future labor market demand. So again, like I say, those are some of the things that we really need to see, so that way we can make more informed decisions as we're scoring all projects that come. The project supported the HEI strategic plan. What we're looking for here is, how does this project align with the institutional mission? And how does it advance the institution's strategic or facility master plan? So, one of the things that the higher education department has done, and I think it was shown in the report, is first the need to have, a capital outlay 5-year plan. I think it was last year, actually may have been 2 years ago, as a lot of institutions were going through accreditation, reaccreditation. One of the big sticking points and one of the big things that came out of the reaccreditation was the need for master plan, facility master plan. And I know a lot of institutions have done a lot of work over the past couple of years in order to develop master plans and or update their current master plan. So what we're looking for is how the project that you are requesting ties into that plan. And so one of the things that you'll notice on here is that we do ask you to provide the URL and the date of the current master plan in the form. So so it's important, again, that this information be provided, so that way it can be scored appropriately. And the other thing that I want to also make note of is that, because this is important, if you don't have the data to support any of the measures that we are talking about, that's okay. We understand at the higher education department that these changes are going to take time for institutions to incorporate. These changes are going to take time for institutions to adapt to. But the other thing that I want to also make note of is that a lot of the information that you may already have as an institution may be used in some of these areas. You just haven't done it as of yet. And so I think it's important that HEIs don't look at this, as a daunting task, because, again, our understanding from the assessment that was done is that a lot of this information is already in place. It's just we don't get the detail, and that's what this is. That's what these measures are intended to allow us to. to do, is to retrieve that information. Facilities assessments. So what this section is for is really to encourage every campus or system as a whole, to have some sort of assessment on your campus facility. We know that the use of energy performance contracts by several institutions, have resulted in some very good detailed analyses of the project, of the campuses. It's provided information on, of course it's energy related, but a lot of infrastructure needs that a campus has. Those things are important in allowing you the opportunity to develop, what your needs are and to prioritize what your needs are. And so really that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for any type of facility assessment that you have done that supports your request. If it is a campus-wide facility assessment, hone in on the assessment for the specific facility. If you have done a campus-wide facility assessment, but it doesn't include the facility, we can't award points because we are looking for the assessment and how this project was raised out of that assessment. If you don't have any assessments at all, again, that's okay. Our hope is that this will start to develop and guide institutions towards looking at assessments. The other point that I want to make is one of the things that we really felt was important in the report is that separation between scoring, prioritization, and assessment. We wanted to make sure that we, as an agency, provided merit and scoring for those institutions that have taken those steps to develop facilities assessments on their campus. At the same time, we didn't want, as an agency, to repeat what we did in 2006 and provide an assessment to everybody, potentially changing what you've already done, all the work that you've already done. And we wanted to give it up to each institution to go ahead and provide us with what they have already done and score it based on that. So that's what this particular assessment is. That's what this scoring matrix is for. So there is a question on this, and it is, how do we satisfy B4 if the project is not a facility but campus infrastructure? That's actually a really good question. And the reality is that if it's not a facility, then what we're looking for is what type of assessment was done in general. It came to the conclusion that this project needed to be a priority. I guess the example that I can use is an assessment done by a vendor on tunnels, and I'll use NMSU as the example on tunnels. There is no quote unquote facilities assessment that was done per se, but there was an in-depth, an assessment done on the structure and needs of the tunnels, and that's what we're looking for, is an assessment. Because again, at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to be able to score based on data. We want to be able to score based on what information you are providing us that is supported. So the next measure is project's impact on campus and off-campus instruction. So this criteria is a measure of how well the project supports both on-campus and off-campus instruction at the HEI. One of the conversations that we've continuously had, and it's a good conversation, is a lot of institutions provide instruction to students that are not considered on-campus enrollment. However, there are facilities that still are needed in order to support that instruction. Or there are institutions that have hybrid courses that are half on, half off. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did is that we established a measure that talks to how the specific project you're submitting impacts both on-campus and off-campus instruction. It'll also give us an indication of, how capital dollars are used to support student instruction and how higher education institutions are balancing, on-campus and off-campus instruction. There is one of the important things that we want to make sure of is that we recognize off-campus instruction and the on-campus facility needs related to that instruction. So we really, this is the section of the criteria where we really want you to be able to discuss this point and provide us with detail, and direct impact on instruction, either off or on campus for this facility. So before we go on to the next section of energy and sustainability, I know there was a couple of comments that came up in the chat. So let me go ahead and go through those real quick. So there was a question of if I could speak about phased projects, and so one of the things that that we always have had in the forms is the ability to show phasing or a breakout of projects if the cost potentially, so that way the committee has an idea of, what pieces of a project, what specific scope of work in a project, can stand alone, if funding isn't available for the entire project. And so I'm thinking that this question is related to what I spoke about earlier in regards to total project cost. And so it is important that phasing, if you've already received funding that's committed for a project, and that project and that money that you've already used, or that you received has already been used to construct, for instance, a first phase, it's important that that also be included in the evaluation. So that way we again can tie that need. And we have several examples of that. We have several projects that have been broken up into two different funding cycles. And so again, I hope that answers the questions on phased projects. As we go into the next sections, I'll talk more specifically about phasing within the project submittal. Another question that we had was if the five-year facility master plan hasn't changed, can we simply reference last year's submission? And so the answer to that would be we do ask for a link. And so all you need to do is just point us to your most current, because that's what we want to see. We want to see your most current plan, and that's all you'll need to do. Is just send us the link to your most current facility plan, master plan. And will project scores ever be shared? So individual project scores for institutions will not be shared. Individual scores by committee members will not be shared. But the ranking of projects based on the scoring will be shared. That's something that that we do want to share, and the reason for that is because our whole goal with implementing this process is to meet what the legislator asked us to do, and that is to come up with a statewide prioritized capital outlay plan for all higher ed institutions. And that's what this, is going to ultimately end up being, is a prioritized statewide list. And then from that list, the recommendations, of course, will be made. So now we'll go on to the project evaluation measures of energy and sustainability. This is the audit, energy cost reduction, and then of course the current executive. So the energy audit. So if you have conducted as an HEI a guaranteed energy savings performance contract, we want you to provide the details of that contract. If you have done a formal energy audit that is not part of the state's guaranteed energy performance contract, we want you to provide details of that as well. What we're really looking for is the project benefits that are associated with the improvements in energy and resource conservation that you are requesting as part of the project you're submitting. We want to understand what those benefits are, and we want to see how you came up with those benefits. So again, this ties back to what we were talking about earlier with some of the other documentation that we're asking you to submit, which is like the facility condition assessment, facility condition index. We want to see either third-party review or other professional assessment that was done in order to validate the information that is being provided. In the manual, you're going to see that there are examples, renewable energy systems. if you're renovating a facility and you're planning on doing a solar, if your you know if your project itself isn't a facility at all, but it is upgrades to your central plant in order to incorporate energy measures that are going to reduce energy consumption. If you're doing those types of things, we want to see what drove the development of those measures. And so the way we've broken it out is simply by listing, if you have completed an assessment, provide us with the information on that assessment. If you have an audit that has been conducted by a vendor or supplier for parts of your campus, or if you have staff that have done a self-assessment, we just need to know how the project was developed. And the scoring is going to tell you, the basis of how the committee is going to be able to score. There's another point that I wanted to make on this is that we recognize that there are several ways to accomplish an energy audit. And I think this is listed in the manual. And so, really, we're going to be providing the scoring for the methods that generally have the most accurate and the most detailed information. And so, that's what we're looking, is that data. And again, campus-wide energy audit is great. We all know that those are something that we as a higher education department support. However, keep in mind that the evaluation is based on the project that you are submitting. So the energy audit, hone in on that particular project or facility. So, I think another question that came up earlier that I think is important is campus infrastructure. You're not going to have an energy audit or any type of energy assessment on certain types of infrastructure requests. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that everybody understands is that if you don't have one, it's okay. We will, as a committee, adjust accordingly based on this measure. So again, like I say, just don't. This isn't going to. You're not going to be penalized if you're submitting a project request that doesn't have a need for an energy audit. We're not going to do that. And so I think it's important to note that, and to note that we will be addressing that. So the next item is the project's impact on energy utility cost reductions. Again, this measure is something that that we really want to understand, more data in detail. We want to understand how the project is going to impact your operating appropriation for the current year and all out years, at least 5 out years. Your details should also include a discussion of any appropriation increases, that may be necessary, or decreases for building or system maintenance. Any increases or decreases in FTEs that may come as a result. And then, of course, we want you to provide information if there is no operating budget impact. And really what this criteria is to establish if there is a goal towards reducing, utility and operation costs, at the institution. And if that's part of the plan as you're developing your project. And again, this is new. So we know that a lot of this hasn't been incorporated. However, we do know of a lot of institutions that are already doing this. So again, it's it's new as a scored measure, but it's really not new as something that we have been looking for as each year as a state. So the next item, is really the executive order. And we incorporated the executive order in here as part of the measure, knowing that we have previous executive orders that we still incorporate as part of the process. The executive order on lead requirements, the executive order on target finding. Those are things that we still look for and look at when we're talking about projects, and that's something that we still evaluate based on. So what this scoring measure does is it really, it really allowed us the opportunity to work on what the governor tasked our agency with. And what she tasked us with was evaluating the impacts of climate change on our programs and operations. And she tasked us with integrating climate change mitigation and adaptation processes into those programs and operations. So for us, it was important for, to incorporate this as a measure, because we want to make sure that each higher education institution is able to explain, how the project will address those goals of integrating climate change mitigation and adaptation practices. And more importantly, how you all are developing your projects going forward in order to build a more sustainable infrastructure into your planning, how decarbonization is potentially being addressed, how energy efficiency technologies are being incorporated. And again, many of the institutions are already doing a lot of this. We are really, we have it as a measure so that way we can start to pull that information. And for those institutions that have not started working on this, we want this measure to help them to start developing their future projects and to start using this and all of the other items that we've incorporated, as a way to start building their next master plan, or the projects that are prioritized for the institution through their mission. So the scoring, integrates verifiable actions to achieve the executive order goal, integrates unverifiable actions, and no action taken to achieve the EO goal. One of the things that I want to make sure that everybody understands also is that these measures really play into each other, right? So if you have a formal energy audit, then you are going to it's going to be very easy for you to demonstrate what we're looking for in Measure C3. And so, again, it's important because these build off of each other. And so that's why I made that point earlier on in the presentation that institutions should use these matrix as the platform for building, you know, your master plan and your projects for your 5-year. So the last item is, you know, stewardship. So under stewardship, we talk about estimates, facility condition index, you know, BR&R, and then maintenance cost. So project estimates. I think many of the institutions know and understand a lot of the questions that have been posed in the past by DFA, LFC, higher ed, you know, in regards to project estimates. You know, accurate project estimates are critical, you know, to the success of the project. And if we are providing funding, a funding recommendation for a project, it's really important for us to know that all of the factors have been taken into account when preparing this estimate. Because again, there's nothing, and we've seen it happen several times, there's nothing worse than a project coming in under budget and scrambling to find funding in order to make up the difference. Or in some cases, reducing the project to make it usable, but not ideally what an institution was looking for. So we're looking, so what we really want institutions to do here is to describe how the project estimates were prepared. And when I say describe, you know, we're really looking for information on how they were developed, who developed, or should I say who developed the estimates, how they were developed, information on whether inflation has been built in, what percentage that inflation is, and of course, more detail on the methodology that was used for preparing the estimate. You know, was there a, you know, did staff go out to the facility and meet with the staff members and the users of the facility? You know, was there a charrette accomplished, you know, in order to build this estimate? Did you hire a firm to come in? And if you did, what steps did they take in order to develop the estimate? Those are the things that we really need to understand, you know, in how the estimate was developed. And of course, like all the other measures, you know, the scoring is going to be based on the level of estimating that was done. And so, so like I say, but we really do need to understand that detail. The project's impact on reducing deferred maintenance. This is really a question from us on how this project is going to reduce your deferred maintenance backlog, if at all. What we did here is, you know, we utilized the categories in the facilities inventory classification method. And, you know, we really want to better understand the impact that capital appropriations are having on deferred maintenance needs. And so, again, this is specific to the project. And and it's important that we get the information that we can use. This is twofold. I think before I had mentioned that there was a recommendation from in the report to to look at and review the R&R. This is one of the ways that it's going to help us assess that and build that picture of the need for BR&R. So this is one of those aspects. The other thing that's important here is it's very easy for an institution to determine the reduction, the impact of the reduction on the FCI if you have had an assessment done. So you'll start to see some of these things tying in. So again, that's kind of a quick overview on this one, on this measure. The next measure is asset stewardship, right? Now this is really the measure that was incorporated in order to look at BR&R as a whole. What we're wanting to understand here is how the HEI uses and plans for BR&R. Do you have a BR&R maintenance plan, a fully established BR&R maintenance plan with projects established in that? BR&R funding is it's not a separate appropriation, as you all know, and so we understand that institutions are still using the old formula for the transfer of BR&R from ING, which gives you a small chunk of money. We also understand that many institutions through the direction of the institution are utilizing BR&R not only for deferred maintenance, but also for other expenses on campus. And so this is going to be important for us, in order to understand what percentage of ING you're using for BR&R as an institution, and to assess how you're planning for BR&R. And then again, and I've mentioned this before, how you're separating BR&R projects from capital outlay projects. This is the information that we're going to be able to extract and utilize as a way to start working on a strategy for BR&R and for BR&R funding. Because once we can show to the legislature that higher education institutions do have a BR&R plan in place, and we do show them that they are trying to address that with the amount of BR&R that they are being appropriated. And once we make some changes to our current requirements for BR&R at the agency level, it'll give us the opportunity to be able to paint that picture and hopefully come up with a way to provide a sustainable BR&R funding for institutions. This is going to take a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years to accomplish. But this information is going to be important in doing it. But what's also important is, as an agency, we need to truly know how you're addressing and managing your assets. And continuing to provide capital outlay without without an understanding of how you're addressing deferred maintenance, is the reason why we have this measure. So you'll see the scoring here. We're going to base it on whether or not you have a BRNR maintenance plan in place, or down the slate of, all the way down to maintenance funds are used for emergency maintenance, to no process at all. And so again, like I say, that's that's kind of an overview of what this particular asset stewardship funding a measure, I'm sorry, is built around. And then, of course, we want to know the impact to operations and maintenance budget. I mean, I think we talked about that a little earlier in one of the first measures in D4. I mean, in this criteria. But really, and I think that many of you who sat in the summer hearings last year, this was a reoccurring question, right? Is we're providing you capital outlay. Now, what is the impact of this going forward? Once you renovate this facility, what's the impact going forward on your operations and maintenance? Once we provide funding for a new facility or new facilities, what's the impact going to be? Once we provide funding for, updated infrastructure, what's the impact to appropriation to operations and maintenance going to be? And that's really what this is meant to capture. If you have several parking lots that you've requested funding for, and you have requested funding to refurnish those parking lots, to refurbish those parking lots, to do a mill and inlay, to do whatever it may be. What is that going to do to your operation and maintenance budget? Is it going to reduce it? Because are you not going to have to spend so much time filling potholes? Is it going to reduce your claims because individuals have made claims because the potholes have damaged their vehicle suspension, right? Those types of things. It's important that we understand that. And when it comes to facilities, it's the same thing. If you are addressing a need that has been draining on your maintenance staff, we want to understand that. Because again, it's important for us to know. But at the same time, if you're adding a new facility, we want to know how's that going to impact your future, operations and maintenance costs. Are you going to need to hire 5 FTEs? Are you going to have to, is it going to increase your, operating budget requests? Those types of things. Because remember, the initial cost for construction or renovation of a facility is, of course, important. And I mean, I think that's what we ask a lot of questions about that. However, the recurring costs for operation and maintenance of that facility or asset, are equally as important. And so that's what we're looking for here. Health, safety, and security. Identify whether the project is needed to bring the facility up to current life safety or energy code requirements. If it is, how was it developed? How did you determine that this project was health, life, safety? Was it a safety assessment that was done on your campus? Did your loss control internally determine that this was a need? Was it the fire marshal that came in and determined that this was a need? Do you have formal plans to address critical health, safety, and security issues on campus? If it is a current life safety or energy code item that needs to be addressed, we need to know what the applicable code is or what the applicable standard is and how this project is going to address it. You know, cite the specific examples of the existing conditions that do not comply with the current codes. So that way we have an understanding of truly what this is. I think that, I think that the agency has always been very cognizant and very supportive of projects that address health and safety because it's important. You know, what this measure allows us to do is it allows us the opportunity to dig in and understand specifically what those needs are, what specific codes they address, and what you will specifically be doing as a result of this project to address them. So we do want you to provide supporting documentation. And we also want you to reference that supporting documentation in the body of the evaluation. And I failed to mention that with the other items as well, but we really do want for you all to attach that supporting documentation and then cite references to it in the evaluation. And then of course, I mean, that's the code issues, but we also want information on how it's addressing major health and safety, right? Whether it be physical safety, cybersecurity, those types of things. Again, we also are looking for the support of how it was determined that that was a need. Did you have an assessment? Do you have a formal plan? Do you have, any other supporting documentation that supports the request? So, so as you can see on the scoring, we do have that listed as 2+ plans. HEI has 2 or more formal plans and is following those plans. And when we say 2+ plans, what we're really talking about is, was this an initiative established in your master plan, and then as a result, that master plan was then split into more specific plans to address these needs, right? That's your 2+ plans, right? A single plan, if you have it in your master plan, but there's no granularity to how you're going to accomplish all of the items that are addressed in your master plan, that's your single plan, or vice versa. Maybe you don't have it in your master plan, but you have it in a formal plan at the campus. And then, of course, we have the specific, this project. And so really, what I want to make clear about this is, if you have done an assessment that is specific to this project and nothing else on campus, then it's not really a plan per se, in the eyes of how we're looking at it. We're looking at it as a holistic, right? You have a holistic plan for the entire campus. Out of that holistic plan, this project was prioritized, and this is why. Versus we're doing this project specifically. We had an assessment done on this project specifically, and the project stands on its own. There's no comparison to any other health, safety, or security issues. That's the points for this project and where that comes from. And then, of course, not at all. Really, the not at all means, that that this project really doesn't address health, safety, and security in any way, shape, or form, or it is not justified through some sort. So is there any questions? Is there any form, any section that anybody wants to talk about a little bit more? Uh, we're running towards the end at noon, the scheduled time, which I'm glad we stopped at 10. Because again, like I said, I really wanted for this to be the deep dive into what we're looking for, and give you the opportunity to go ahead and discuss, any of what we just talked about. So I'll open it up now for questions. Feel free to enter it in the chat or use the raise hand function, and of course I'll call on you, and we'll go from there. So I don't see any hands, and I don't see any comments. So with that said, let me go ahead and just go on, because there is something else that I definitely want to cover today. So what's next, right? So this morning, we went over the background and information that the NMHED requested and received from GHaubold Consulting, through the 2019 capital outlay process review report. We also discussed, what we implemented as a result of that report. The forms, the instruction manual, the matrix, the metrics, the criteria, all of that was developed, around what the report gave us, and also developed around, as I mentioned in the earlier slides, what our current New Mexico Administrative Code requirements are, and what the institutions have at their disposal and are already doing. So, so one of the things that that we haven't really covered is, the recommendation on a software. So that's what I want to talk about now. So on October 1st of last year, the Higher Education Department issued an RFP to select a cloud-based software and data warehouse solution to receive, assess, score, and prioritize capital outlay funding requests from higher education institutions. One of the things that was really important to us is that everything we covered in the previous slides, what we've built up, we wanted to make sure that that remained in place. So I'm excited to announce that, from that RFP, we were able to bring a vendor on board, and that vendor is actually actively working on this project for us. I want to stress to everyone that the project evaluation measures, the instruction manual, the evaluation forms, and the process that we talked about are still in place and will continue to be in place for this year's capital outlay funding request process. So I want you all to continue to move forward with preparing your projects and planning to submit them by June 1st using the criteria, the metrics, the forms, and everything that we've discussed today as your guide for submittal. You know, the updated instruction manual and the forms, which I did give you all a link to as part of the training, are going to be posted in the summer hearings portion of the website after this training as well. And I'm also going to send out an email letting you all know that, as well as a discussion or an email noting when the hearings are going to be held. So just as a little sneak peek, we are not going to hold the hearings the way we have in the past. We are not going to visit institutions, unfortunately. I mean, I think that was a great way for us to be able to get out to the institutions, but it's too soon. And we're not going to, we don't want to do that right now. So the hearings will be done remotely as they were last year. And they are going to be condensed instead of through a 2-week period. They're going to be condensed into 1 week. So more information, like I say, on that will be coming out, including the dates. I'm still finalizing some last-minute details. Otherwise, I would have given you all the date now for the presentation. But again, I'm reiterating that everything that we're talking about and discussing is not changing. What I want you all to expect, though, over the next few months, as I mentioned, the vendor that we brought on, which is Definitive Solutions, and we are very happy to have them on board, will be continuing to work on developing the software for the higher education department. So over the next few months, we're going to be requesting a point of contact from all of the institutions. This point of contact is going to be the individual that will work with Definitive Solutions, as well as us here at the agency, of course, to provide information and data to Definitive Solutions. And then we'll also be requesting, several months down the road, volunteers to test the new software solution. I think it's, it is very exciting for us here at the agency because one of the things that, that we wanted when we went out to RFP for this is a software program that would not only prioritize and and house the data and analyze the data for us, but we really wanted a solution that would capture our process as a whole. And so work is being done on on developing just that, using the metrics that we currently have, using the measures that are in that metrics, and building a scoring and ranking process based on those measures. So what to expect after implementation? Well, for the higher ed institutions, a submittal portal for capital funding. I think that one of the things that that we wanted to make sure that we could do uh, as we were venturing on this very large project is make sure that we gave you all a submittal portal that would allow you the opportunity to go ahead and upload the information that you have. Not only the information that we're requesting on the forms, because that information is still going to remain in place, but also a way for you all to upload the data that you currently have to support your project. Um, Now, the work on that is still in progress. As I mentioned earlier, this is, in the previous slide, should I say, this is where that outreach for a point of contact at the institutions is going to come in. Because that point of contact is going to be the work between your institution and the vendor to really understand and develop the process for uploading the data that each institution has. Because remember, what I mentioned early on is we didn't want a one size fits all approach because that's just not how it works. We understand that each institution has their processes, and we wanted to develop in our process on this end through the software and through the system that is being developed, a way to bring in that data from each institution. And that's what this is. That's exactly what we're working on. So like I say, what to expect after implementation, and is the portal and training. We will, we will be um, uh, with, of course, the assistance of the vendor, providing detailed training on the system and detailed training on the capabilities and how the system will work with what it is that you all have at your institution. So again, like I say, I'm really excited to kind of roll this out today as the next steps, of what we're going to be doing. And most importantly, as we bring all of this together, what we've talked about today, and because it's a lot of ground that we covered in a short period of time today, especially for a virtual meeting. So I appreciate everybody hanging in. But I really felt it was important to give each of you an overview of the changes made, to the higher education process, what ultimately drove those changes, which is our need to understand the institutions more and understand what other states are doing, which resulted in the report. And then give you all an idea of what from that report we took and implemented into our current process. And then, of course, what to expect going forward, which is uh, everything that we've talked about, but streamlined into a software system that is going to make submittal easier for you all on your end. But then on our end, at the higher education department, really capitalize on that data and really be able to prepare a comprehensive statewide prioritization for all projects. And again, not based on a one-time assessment, but based on your current data at each HEI. And that to me was most important for me. So, so like I say, that's really what I wanted to cover and what I really wanted to talk about. You know, as I mentioned before, you know, the video of this training, the PowerPoint presentations and other materials are going to be posted on the Capital Projects training page. I actually listed that on the slide here. The same goes for the summer hearing documents, but those are going to be on the summer hearings page, which I also posted that here on this slide for all of you to see. And of course, my contact information, which I'm sure everybody already has, but I went ahead and posted it on here as well. So that way you would have it. You know, and really, in closing, I really want to thank Secretary Rodriguez, you know, for joining us this morning. I want to thank Glen Haubold, you know, for all of the work that that he did, and the individuals at GHaubold Consulting, you know, in helping the higher education department to really understand and strategize on, you know, on how to best make use of the funding that the legislature provided us before just jumping into doing something that potentially was not going to be sustainable or work. And then, of course, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all of you, you know, for taking the time to join us today. You know, for all of the work that you all are doing at your institutions, and for, you know, and for your great partnerships. You know, I've been in this position for several years now, and I feel like we have created some great partnerships and some great work relationships that have allowed us the opportunity to be here where we are today. And so with that, I'm gonna, you know, just one last thing that I want to bring up, and then I'll open it up for questions. Is this is the first of several trainings that are going to be provided over the next several months. On the training page for the higher education department, you'll see the trainings that are planned. The next training that is planned will have a save the date sent out next week. And then you can find that information on the trainings page as well. But again, like I say, I'm glad that we're able to get back into the trainings, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to you know, to build on these trainings as we move forward. So again, thank you everybody for joining us, and I'll go ahead and open it up to questions on any part of the presentation or any questions you may have.
There's some questions in the chat.
Thank you, Marvin. So let me find where I left off, so that way I don't ask the same questions again. So one of the questions we had is, will we submit for the summer hearings via email? So the answer to that question is no. There is what we will be doing this year is, and it is on the checklist, is when you have all of your summer hearing documents compiled, you'll send me an email letting me know that you are ready to upload your summer hearing documents. Once you do that, I will send you a link The link will then allow you the opportunity to upload all of your files and then send it back to me. This is the solution that DoIT provided for us now. It's not the best solution, but I'm excited to say that this hopefully will be the last time we have to do it, because, as you know, we are creating the the system that'll allow for web submittals of the form of the documentation. So I hope that answered that question. The next question: are we allowed to upload drawdown requests through the new submittal portal? No. The new submittal portal is specifically for the summer hearing documentation. And that brings me to another point. This portal will not change the current monthly submittal process either. That portal, the CPTSS for the monthly hearings, will still remain in place as well. As a long-term goal, I would like to be able to say that we can merge every submittal for capital into a single system, but that is not happening today or with this particular system. So just to clarify, the portal that I just discussed for the summer hearings is just for summer hearings. Next question: how does this new process impact the information submitted for the ICIP? So, this is a conversation that we have had, I think each year, and believe me, I feel for the higher ed institutions. It is my hope that once DFA sees what we are doing here, that they will be open to a migration of data to populate the ICIP. That's just a hope. Right now, as you know, they are two separate systems currently, and they still will be two separate systems going forward that will require institutions to still upload their information into the ICIP separately. But again, my hope is that we'll be able to, once we get ourselves established, that'll open the door for, for potential migration of projects from our system into the ICIP. So I think that actually answers the other question. Will this portal replace the need for institutions to submit ICIP? Again, it doesn't, but my hope is that it will. Will institutions be allowed to see data from other schools? No. The data that is submitted to the higher education department by your institutions is going to be similar to how CPTSS works, meaning that institutions can only see institution data. Now, we do anticipate the ability, well, we don't anticipate it, we will have the ability to run reports based on the data that we have. But we are not in a position today to be able to answer the question of whether or not that data and how that data will look, and whether or not that data, will be shared outside of the way that LFC currently shares data, right? In the way that we share enrollment data across all institutions, in the way that we share FTE data across all institutions. We're not at that point yet to talk about, how we're going to share other data. There's another comment that came up here, and that's institutions could choose to share the data online for other HEIs to view. And that is true. I think that you all already do that in a lot of ways. I think that, and I'm just going to pick institutions that I know off the top of my head. I think that, UNM shares their facility data. I think that NMSU does the same thing. So again, none of this data is quote unquote, restricted data. It's just that at this time, the agency doesn't have direction on, on how it will be shared. For now, what you upload is only accessible to you as an institution, your own data. It is not our plan to share it outside at this time. When we get to that point, we would never share data unless we had conversations with all of the higher education institutions on what that would look like and what we would be sharing. So another question, is there a plan regarding space utilization? So one of the things that we did in this matrix and how we've established this is we have left it up to the institution on how they want to address space utilization, but we will score based on space utilization. And I guess what I'm trying to say with that is we didn't want to determine a specific type of approach that an institution needed to take to assess their utilization. But we did want to create a measure that would drive institutions towards choosing that, that assessment. Now, I don't know if that answers your question as far as a plan regarding space utilization. We really want to leave it up to the institution to decide on how they're going to address this, because we understand that there's budgetary constraints related to number one, doing a full facility condition assessment, and then number two, maintaining and updating that information. So again, that's pretty much all I have right now in regards to that. Anybody else have any other questions? That's all I see. I don't see any hands raised. Let me just scroll through one more time just to make sure that I caught everything. Actually, I think that's all of them. I scrolled through all of the questions, and that's all I see. Oh, okay. Thank you for the clarification on the standards. So right now, we are using and will continue to use NACUBO and FICUM standards for space. And so, so I think it's important that, that institutions, if you haven't already, really adapt those standards for space utilization. And when I say that, obviously FICUM is standards for type of space, but NACUBO has, has established standards for utilization. And so, so as an agency, we have not established those or any new standards regarding space utilization. I know that that GSD does have standards for state space, However, we have not established those same standards for higher ed. We are basing it on what NACUBO has as a guide, that is something that potentially will need to be addressed, but we have not addressed it for what we are doing here today. So I hope that answers your question. All right, I don't see any more questions that have popped up. So again, I really appreciate everybody's time. I know it was a long morning. It was my hope that we would that we would be able to spread these out a little bit more to where we weren't on Zoom so long. So I appreciate you all bearing with me as we went through this. And if any questions come up afterwards, please feel free to let me know, and I'll do my best to get responses out to you. So thank you, everyone. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and look forward to continuing to work with you all as we move towards the summer hearings. Take care, everyone.